Who out there in the audience is with something that might be described as a vertical marketplace? So a few folks. Okay, well, sorry, you want to come on up? Come on up. No. But anyway, so we've got a group, a kind of cross-section of executives from verticals or vertical marketplaces, and I'm going to let them tell you who they are, and then I want you to think of questions. We've got a whole prepared thing, but I want you to think of questions that you want them to answer, and we're going to get you to say those up front so they know what you're interested in, and we can incorporate that into the very short conversation that we have going today. So why don't you start, Umang?
Sure. Quick background. So Umang, I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of a company called Handy, formerly known as Handybook. What we do is pretty simple. It's a platform for booking home services, so cleaners, handymen, electricians on demand.
Great. I'm Scott Jampol. I'm SVP of Marketing with OpenTable. Hopefully you all have OpenTable on your mobile phone. You can use it for dinner tonight. Super excited to talk a little bit about marketplaces. Company's been around since 1998, which is pretty amazing. So one of the earlier marketplaces that's emerged through technology. Thanks for having me.
I'm Leigh McMillan. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Avvo, which is the web's largest online legal marketplace. We have been around since about 2007. And if you go ask a legal question on Avvo, it is highly likely you'll get multiple answers from an attorney within an hour.
Okay, let's pretend this is the end of the session. You've heard all this great conversation and really stimulating, exciting. You're feeling like this was the best session, worth the price of admission alone. Now I say, we'd like to get some of your questions from the audience for our speakers. So who's got a question? Okay.
Thank you. So my question is around call analytics. I've been in the business for a long time. I think some of you use call analytics, some may not. Back in the day, it was really all about proof of performance. Today, we're seeing more things around optimization, or maybe it's what content actually drove the call. How are you guys all using call analytics today?
Don't answer that question. Next question. Anybody else want to ask a question? No? Yes? Somebody? Really? Court, you have a question for these guys.
Hey, between Handy and OpenTable, you guys have two different models. OpenTable is doing lead gen for the small business, but really is their operational system managing their table inventory. Handybook is really just lead gen. Do you think that these marketplaces need to be doing lead gen as well as back office operations, or just one part of the equation, either front office or back office, can be successful on its own?
Okay, don't answer that question. Over here, anybody else? Let's take one more. I'm going to call on somebody. Oh, okay.
Sitting in the front row, you get extra points.
That's right. So this is probably more for OpenTable and Handy as well. Urban area, downtown versus suburbs. We've heard it a couple times today, but just your guys' feedback.
Well, I didn't understand what you just asked.
Focusing on the downtown urban area versus the suburbs.
So coverage, market coverage. Okay, so you just heard a question about call tracking and analytics, back office operations versus lead gen, and then the coverage, where do you focus? Do you guys want to respond to any of those? We've got a list of questions here, but why don't each of you respond to the question that was most interesting to you that you just heard? Scott Jampol.
Well, they were all interesting questions. Thank you very much. I'll start with the one about front office versus just lead gen or transaction based. So many people probably don't know that OpenTable is not just simply a website or mobile app that lists availability at restaurants. In fact, the primary value that we provided to restaurants when we started was the ability for them to better manage the front of the restaurant. So for their hosts and service up front, for their CRM with their customers, to take notes on existing customers. So, and the reason we did that was that creating a network from scratch is really complicated. And one of the things we'll probably talk a lot about today is supply and demand, and how do you match supply and demand, especially before you have neither supply nor demand. So with OpenTable, it was very critical to us to be able to provide discrete value, answering real pain points of restaurateurs through technology from the very onset. It gave them a reason to want to work with us before we could promise that we would deliver incremental diners. So as the network has matured and in markets that were well established, the value is more even, or in some cases for restaurants becomes much more about the demand that we can put into the restaurants. But I do think it is really critical for you to think about that if you're thinking about building out a marketplace. Is what other pain points can you solve that may or may not be related to the two-sided equation? Because I think it also builds defensibility and switching costs for you for those audiences. So I think it's a great question.
And I'll answer that one as well, because we're a little bit different. We actually started in the reverse order. So we sent a bunch of, we don't call them leads, but contacts to attorneys, and we found that they didn't have the systems in place to respond as rapidly as consumers expected them to. And so we ended up having to provide those services so they would not only service the folks that we were sending them, but also wouldn't discount the value of what we were sending them because they were leaving it on the floor. So we ended up getting into it in the reverse.
Yeah, I'll answer, I guess, the two questions relevant for us, which are both great questions. So we don't actually think of ourselves as lead generation. And the reason I say that is because lead gen to me means in a world where you have someone's interested in buying a service, and then you kind of pass that out to 3 or 4 people, and your customer in that case is the people paying for those leads, right? Our platform works pretty differently. It's more an Uber-like model essentially, where you kind of control the experience. You make a booking on the site, you pick the date, time, you pay the site essentially, and then we figure out sort of who takes that job, and then we pay the service provider. And so when you are in this sort of, you control the experience right from someone coming onto the site to the service delivery in large parts, you have to get really into that service provider, that professional's life. There is no way you can be very low touch where it's just, the market needs to be controlled. And I think you look at, different companies have taken different approaches to that, whether it means, I know you said back office, front office. For us, it's essentially, does our role stop once we offer you the job, or are we worried about how many jobs a person's doing in a week or a month? Is this enough to support them? Should we get into, and we haven't done a lot of these things, but should we get into helping them with taxes? Should we help them with providing discounted access to, I don't know, childcare, healthcare, et cetera? So slowly over time, we do want to think about the whole experience end to end, and I think if you really want to control a sort of vertical and an experience, you kind of have to do that. So
nobody wanted to answer your question. I guess it was not a very good question.
Well, I'll give some perspective on that. I think the growth of marketplaces, especially local marketplaces, is changing a bit. But I would say that one of the lessons we learned along the way was the importance of concentration, right, and the importance of focus. And so I can recall stories of drawing a circle on a map and telling our salespeople, you don't get paid if you sign a restaurant that's outside this circle, right? Because it was all about building that network, right, and building that marketplace so that we had liquidity, right, on both sides, and the supply and demand was really matched. So I think you tend to think about growing really, really quickly and getting in as many places as a land grab when you have a good idea for a marketplace. But I think it comes at a cost of the depth of that experience. And I think when you don't have a good match of supply and demand, one of the 2 important people in your marketplace is not happy, right? And so you really need to think about that.
Yeah, and I think that applies. I mean, a stock example, for instance, just illustratively, is growing 10x in, completely illustratively, in a city like Tampa, let's say, for us, or growing, let's say we've decided Chicago is a focus, growing 2x in Chicago. We would make those trade-offs where that may add more revenue and that may make the numbers look better, but strategically, in terms of what we need to do, growing even a little more in Chicago is a better trade-off. And so you make kind of the same trade-offs when you think about expansion, suburbs, or do you focus on the center? Because it's, as a marketplace, what you're trying to really do is just get the flywheel spinning. And once you get it spinning, it has sort of a life of its own. And the harder you make it on yourself by going wider, it's just that much harder.
Well, so apropos of that, back when Yelp was still a new company in 2004, 2005, there were a number of competitors that were doing identical things, insider pages, Judy's book, Tribe.net was doing something quite similar. And they were all trying to get people to review local businesses and offering various incentives or not, as the case may be. And some of these guys went national, and Yelp did not. Yelp stayed in San Francisco and didn't go national. And in reflection, now I'm blanking on his name. The guy who was Andy Sack, who was the founder of Judy's book, said we went national too soon, and that was one of the reasons why we failed, because we failed to get the kind of density and usage. So speak about that a little bit. So the question of when you broaden out, how do you go to, do you stick with one market until you have total saturation? Do you try and do multiple markets? What's your advice on that?
It really depends. I mean, that's a good example on Yelp, but like you look at how fast Uber's expanded, and they've gone very, very quickly.
International.
But yeah, internationally and domestically, right? So, I would just say that it depends on how fast you can get the flywheel moving, and in some ways, how fast your network grows individually, right? You certainly don't want to go too slow, but until, once you have some proof points, and then you can show that it replicates between markets or between countries, then I think that's really where you want to take off the gloves and go as fast as you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question like we ask ourselves all the time. We're in a space it's big. It's sort of it's not restricted to a certain city. The needs in Paris are the same as the needs to some degree in San Francisco or Dallas. And so we keep asking ourselves like, when is the right time? And we're in we're in 28 markets. We're in London, which is obviously international for us, and we're 2 years old. So it's relatively fast. And yet, it's one of the most common questions, whether it's internally in the team or externally, is like, when will you launch X other city? Or a competitor has done Y, and how are you going to do that? I think that the way we think about it is either there is a natural reason to expand. So for Airbnb, it makes a lot of sense to be in multiple markets because they have these network effects that wouldn't work if they were just in one market. And the second thing is your service and is your customer delivery, the service delivery, is that completely buttoned up? And you'll never have it maybe 100% buttoned up, but does it feel like it's, and I think that's where Uber was, right? Uber's service delivery is by and large pretty good, and that's when they went on this rampant. It wasn't year one where they decided to launch in Manila or whatever. They took their 2-3 years, and then when they decided to pull the plug, they went super aggressive. But it wasn't till I think they felt they could deliver a great service experience. And I think that's the part we're working on now, is we want to win sort of the markets we're in, focus on those, and then at some point, we'd love to pull the Uber, let's do 50 cities in 6 months. But I think you wait for that.
Yeah, we're a little bit different in that we started off nationwide. So we started as a directory for attorneys, and information about attorneys is uniquely publicly available. And so we started off by rating attorneys nationwide, but then when it came to building the flywheel, we started in 5 markets and 5 practice areas at a time. So we had basic information levels, but then focused on the markets. And that was largely for us to learn as to what the triggers were for the markets, what do consumers really, really need. So it was more about that and understanding it before we went nationwide than it was, I think, some of the supply-side acquisition that these guys have. So we're slightly different.
Well, so you raised the question of directory, and among you talked about the back office, front office stuff. Implied in that is an answer, but what is the difference between, I mean, we did this on the call, what's the difference between a directory and a lead gen service and what, a quote true vertical marketplace or a true marketplace? I mean, what would be the top distinctions there in your minds, if they exist?
So we think they exist, and there's actually kind of a laundry list of things that I could highlight that we think are differences, but I'll just hit on a few.
Stop leaving. Stop leaving. Go ahead.
That means you. We think a directory aggregates information, but a marketplace enhances it and enhances the experience beyond just providing a basic level of information. I would also say economic advantage to one or ideally both sides of the equation, the supply side and the demand. So looking for economic advantages associated with it. And then it delivers an experience that didn't previously exist before. So, for example, OpenTable, obviously, now you can scan reservations in restaurants in a matter of seconds. You could not otherwise do that, and you could not do that with a directory. And so those are just three of the immediate things.
What is that thing that didn't exist in your case, in Avvo's case?
In Avvo's case, it was, first of all, transparency. So the legal industry is one of the most untransparent until recent years. You don't know cost. You don't know how to evaluate one attorney versus another. This one bills in 6-minute increments. This one doesn't. Is $200 an hour good or is it bad? And so similar to Zillow, the way that we started off was by democratizing information. And so that enabled consumers to evaluate attorneys in ways that they couldn't previously at all. And now we're layering on services like one that we just launched where you can talk to an attorney for 15 minutes for a flat fee. And so we're chunking up what used to be a retainer-driven, you had to commit to the attorney, there was a lot of paperwork involved, and we're taking that away. So that if you have just an immediate one question, like I had a clause in a non-compete contract, I didn't want to go and hire an attorney just to do that, you can get those answers. And so it's things like that.
15 minutes could save you 15% or more on your attorney fees.
That's exactly right.
Sounds good.
Okay, all right. So that's a segue into, and I'll opportunistically seize upon that. Mobile, right? A lot of these markets are now being built around apps. Where does mobile figure into the whole equation? Do you go mobile first? Do you go mobile only with the PC as a kind of secondary thing? That was Foursquare, which isn't really a marketplace but a directory. Speak broadly about the role of mobile and where you see it now in the whole marketplace equation. Uber certainly is an app first and foremost.
So about 45% of the reservations now originate on mobile devices for OpenTable. So obviously mobile we're a mobile first company. I think mobile creates...
Not until you get to 51%.
Yes, good point. Well, we think about mobile first. It is incredibly important. It does create a lot of new use occasions, and I think that's one of the most important pieces that it does. It makes the marketplace much more accessible, quite obviously, because it's in your pocket. You don't have to be in front of the computer. However, I would say, though, that different markets and different folks have different preferences in that regard. And we also provide mobile products for the restaurants, by the way, and they're using those extensively because they fit their service a lot better. I happen to know that I'd prefer to use the OpenTable's mobile app than I do our website. So it comes down to preference. I think it's pretty important if you're trying to be a local company that you're going to be able to offer both. And we're committed to both, and we still see different use patterns, especially, like the use case of I know what restaurant I want to go to versus I want to browse restaurants and discover restaurants. Mobile doesn't provide a great experience for the latter. It provides a really great experience for the former, especially if there's a location-based aspect to it.
Yeah, we have a kind of unique, in that we're, on the customer side, we're not, as of now, and I'll get to sort of why I think that it's important, but we're not that mobile heavy right now. But are we a mobile first company? Yes. Like, we would not have been around. Like, you could not launch a business like Handybook or Handy like 10 years back, because our whole supply side runs 100% on mobile, right? And we send them jobs, whether it's through the portal and app that they have on the phone, or it's text messages, or it's able to get the location to serve the right jobs, or whatever it is. Like, the only reason this sort of business can exist, and obviously companies like Uber can exist, is because of this technology. And so it's not just important, it's like critical. That's what we're based off. Our whole supply side works off sort of their smartphone, or works off, in some cases we still support text messaging, but over time that's becoming a minuscule portion of what we do. And even on the customer side, we launched on web, and then we built an app. And to be honest, even 2 years ago, to some degree, it was almost an afterthought, the app, and it's just a mind shift. We, for instance, one of the most, like a year ago, we got some advice from Paul English, who's one of the founders of Kayak, and he literally, it was pretty extreme advice, which was, he was like, shut down your website. He was like, why are you even giving people the option? Because you're just creating this option, and then they'll migrate there. and then you won't be able to get them on the app, which you can do a whole lot more with. And we haven't done that, but that's just an extreme sort of position. And we're feeling that now. Like the people on the app, they repeat much more, they're far more engaged. We can send them push notifications, we can get their location, we can show them how far their cleaners are, we can cross-sell them other services. It's insane. The difference is just stark. And I think even for us, like even though we see it, we just need to act, like move faster, because the opportunity is just huge.
So Leigh, you're a high consideration, except for the non-compete clause scenario, you're a high consideration purchase. What role does mobile play in your business?
Yeah, we're again a little bit different. I'm the odd woman out here. In that location doesn't matter as much to us. People care that your attorney's in your neighborhood, but it's not an immediate thing, although maybe down the road if you get arrested, we might have a thing that tells you attorneys that are there at the jail. I don't know, maybe we'll do that. For us, it's more about connectivity. So it aids the connection between a consumer and the attorney, and it enables us to do it a lot faster. So an example of that is attorneys tend to have downtime at odd times. We kind of call it the go gap. So there's a gap that they would like to monetize, and we would like to help them do that and enable them to connect with consumers in order to do that. So one of the things that we do is we use text, so notifications, so the attorney can log in on their mobile phone and tell us they are available to take calls, and then we know that we can send business to them during these times, and then they log off again. So things like that. Down the road, things like taking a picture of your speeding ticket so that you get the ticket to the attorney faster. So for us, it's about thinking of connectivity and ways to leverage technology in mobile phones to just do things faster.
Okay, I want to go back out into the audience and invite more questions. Are there questions? If I'm going to make the long trip down from the stage? Oh, okay, great.
In looking at different verticals, how do you decide, A, which vertical to go into? And then once you're in multiple verticals, I know Handy is for sure, how do you decide which ones to nurture and put energy into?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really, really, really good question. We have some criteria we look at. There's no science to it, obviously, is the short of the answer. I mean, the way we think about it is, one, how relevant is it to our customer base, the existing customer base, so that we don't have to go out and reacquire more customers. You know, if we did elderly care or something, it may not be as relevant to our customer base. That would feel like just launching maybe a parallel business. Whereas if, you know, we do home cleaning is a big part of the business, and we started doing, I mean, we do it, but we focused on furniture assembly or painting or moving. It's the same customers using a lot of these services. So one thing to consider if you're in multiple verticals is you do not want to ideally reacquire the customer. You want to build off what you've already sort of done. The second thing is the supply side is vastly different, or could be potentially vastly different, right? Like a cleaner is very different from if we did lawyers, right? Like that would be a completely different world. We'd have to not only internally train the team differently, which is almost the easier part, it's building the product and the tools to be able to cater to that vertical. So that's the other axis we think about a lot, which is, you know, does our product cater to them? And in some cases, it's 12 months away or it's 36 months away. In some cases, we can do it now. And then obviously you've got, you know, market size and things like that. But those are the two things we think about.
Any other questions?
I recently saw a TV spot, Leigh, on Avvo, and I believe it was on a major network or cable, and that was the first time that I really understood that you provide that service now. So I just wonder if there is a budget for like an OpenTable or an Avvo or Handy for major broadcasts, because that was the first time, again, that I knew that I could go to Avvo if I had a legal question.
Well, I think that teaching the category is super important, right? Especially where the category didn't exist before. So we were lucky in that our category was built through word of mouth in the United States because we've been around for so long and because there was such pain associated with trying to call restaurants, especially in busy markets. So a lot of the awareness in terms of the category building happened organically, which is terrific. I think television and other broad media can be really useful. We, for example, ran some television ads in London area this past summer to try to teach a bit of category and preference within that market. We've tested that in other places as well, and I think you'll continue to see that. It really depends on where the underlying economics are, though, for that spend. And obviously, something like television can be incredibly expensive if you have a national or multinational approach.
Okay, Leigh, did you?
Yay, I'm glad you saw the ad. We're running in 4 test markets right now. One of the reasons why we wasn't just about brand awareness. It is very specific to our category, and that is Pew Internet does a study every year on the least admired professions, and lawyers are somewhere down at the bottom, almost always on the bottom. And so our mission is to make getting legal services as routine as getting your car serviced. And in order to do that, we have to change consumers' perceptions, because we also believe there is a big market out there for people who are not currently getting legal services because they're scared, they don't understand how it works. And so that's part of the reason why we're doing TV ads as well. It's not brand for brand's sake, it's to get people to think about legal differently, starting with us, of course.
Okay, so I got a question in the back here. I'm way in the back. No? Turn? Yes? Here I am.
So this question probably for Scott mostly. How do you think about, in terms of the restaurant business, obviously the restaurant business in New York is very different than that in Kansas City. How do you guys think about, in terms of your marketing, from a national and local perspective, in terms of how you might control it differently, both from a national and local perspective, when it comes to like email marketing or social media or anything the like?
Well, I think they are different in that the cuisines and the style of restaurant may be different, but at the end of the day, especially reservation-taking restaurants, they all want to provide great hospitality to their guests so that they come back and so that they have fulfilling, rich experiences. And so, you know, that's our mission as OpenTable, is to help provide and power these great dining experiences and moments. And so a lot of our marketing and a lot of our efforts is really focused on helping to promote that. And so we promote restaurants pretty much the same in those different markets. We're lucky that we have a terrific selection of restaurants, so we have content to promote, whether it's via email, whether it's via social, or when we did campaigns like in London, where we're featuring restaurants prominently, because those, obviously, that's the best merchandising that we can do, is to get people excited about those restaurants. I do think that the economics, though, in terms of the frequency at which people dine out, vary greatly. Whenever I talk to someone in New York, they're like, wait, people don't go out to dinner every night and all across the country? And it's true, here in New York and in San Francisco, people do tend to dine out a lot more versus in some of the smaller markets where it might be once a month or special occasion only. So frequency is a trickier thing to work on there.
It's actually, when it comes to the consumer, though, would you say there's a different consumer and you have to speak to them differently when it comes to the consumer in New York and the consumer in Kansas City?
I'm not certain I understand. Like, it's pretty much the same.
Culturally, I think is what he's saying.
Yeah. There is some localization based on what we know about folks, and we have millions and millions of reviews that folks write. Once they've dined at a restaurant, we ask them to give us their opinion about it. And so mining that data can be really useful to help localize our marketing, whether it's dishes that are trending or cuisines that are trending or aspects of the dining experience that are particularly standout. So we're able to use that, which is a good way to look at it. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. We have another one.
Hi, I'm in the home improvement space as well, and lead gen. And one of the things we've had to do is to insert a call center into the middle of the lead generation process, just because homeowners seem to really want to do that. And I'm wondering how you have handled those, both on the home side and on the legal side, where a lot of times the homeowners or the person's first instinct is to pick up the phone rather than to go online.
Yeah, I can. Again, I think we're a technology company, but we're definitely obviously service company as well, and we're somewhere in between where we deal with these customer calls and their experiences, and you have to make it right, and they have questions, and you need to be able to answer them. I think where we focused is when we pick a service, to the other question about how we pick services as well, is we've been a little careful, at least till now, and I think for the next few months as well, to pick services that are either discrete in that, it's something you can book on demand. So what we wouldn't do is in the current model at least, we would never do, I need to rewire my house, or I need to build an extension, or I need something that is either wildly subjective or something that is such a large ticket purchase that you're not going to book it in 60 seconds online. You're just not going to do it, at least in the format we currently sell it to you. So that's not answering a question entirely, but we'll only pick services that can be broken down into, all right, you want furniture assembled? Is it a bed? Is it a couch? If you can say that, we know exactly what it is, and we'll be able to do it. So we have the support facility to answer the questions, but at our current state, we're really trying to minimize the need for interaction unless something goes wrong.
This would be, if you want to follow up, you can. Otherwise, answer the call tracking question, or the way that call analytics factor into your businesses, if at all.
Well, I used to run the call analytics business at Marchex, so I kind of know a little bit about that. So we use it. One of our things is we provide full transparency to the attorneys about how their advertising is performing, and so call tracking is a key part of that. So all of our advertisers get call tracking numbers from us that they can utilize on our site, so we don't give it to them to use elsewhere, but, and then we supply all of the call data to them.
Okay, so are there other questions? We have about 5 minutes left, or a little less than 5 minutes left. Okay, so as just an ordinary consumer, you go about your life and then you hear about these services. Oh, Airbnb or Uber or OpenTable or Avvo, as the case may be, Handy. And they seem to have come out of nowhere, from a certain point of view, right? I mean, obviously that's not true. I want you to talk a little bit about how you built your businesses. I mean, OpenTable had salespeople and had a long time in the market. But how do you go about building supply and demand at the same time? This is always the chicken and egg problem that always gets discussed with verticals. Can you speak real briefly about, paradoxically, speak briefly about how you built your business, how you do that? So go ahead.
Sure. The short of it is it's really, really hard. Like, this is not every business.
So be as concrete as you can in talking about your particular business.
Yeah. For us, it essentially starts with the supply side, right? Just logistically speaking, we wouldn't have a business if we didn't have professionals, cleaners, handymen on the platform. And so for us, even when we started, and even today, it starts with, all right, how do we onboard a certain amount of supply? And you can't onboard too much because then it churns really fast, right? You onboard 10 people tomorrow and there aren't 10 jobs to do the next day. They're going to go find something else to do, right? There's no necessary reason for them to be on our platform beyond the jobs we provide. So it starts with the supply. You really try and understand what is the bare minimum you need. And there is some pain around, there's some friction when you're trying to get the marketplace right? We'll onboard 10 people in New York and San Francisco, let's say. Suddenly we open bookings up the next day and we have a lot of bookings in San Francisco. You just scramble. The early days is just like, we're like, oh shit, we need more cleaners or more handymen here.
You put ads on Craigslist, you call people.
You put ads on, you do what it takes, which for us is a mixture of, you're posting classified ads, you're posting lots of the consumer stuff works on the supply side as well. You run an ad on the subway or the metro, and it gets you a lot of professionals on the supply side. But it's this constant sort of, you start with supply, you understand what gets them on the platform, and then you just keep recalibrating. And over time, what you hope you do is you start building a playbook, right? So over time, and it's taken us a while, and we still haven't perfected it by any means, but now we have a playbook where we understand, you're looking at certain leading indicators and metrics, and you understand where you need supply and where you need demand, and then you focus on that area.
Okay, so Leigh, why don't you answer that question if you can?
So we also started on the supply side. We started with attorneys, and I can tell you exactly what we did. We rated them, which makes them mad, and they call you to yell at you, and then you start a dialogue with them as to how this can help them get more business and why transparency and legal is good. On the consumer side, we did SEO, so our traffic is largely organic driven, and the way we did that was with a Q&A forum where consumers can come in and ask a question, attorneys answer it. So attorneys get free marketing exposure, consumers get legal advice, we get SEO-friendly content, and it's a big win.
Okay, so we're basically in the final minute here. Just, you're advising a room full of entrepreneurs about how to think about their verticals, how to start their verticals, the big lesson, the thing you wish you would have done better. One piece of advice for the audience, and that's your final comment. So, Scott, why don't you start?
I guess I would say focus on real pain points that are real to both sides of the equation if you want to start a marketplace business, and do everything you can to eliminate that pain as quickly as possible. Small businesses especially have dozens of folks calling them, offering them technology, offering them marketplaces to participate in on a daily basis. And I think that the ones that they actually make time for, because they don't have time for anything except running their small business, are the ones that are acutely aligned with what hurts them the most or what they're most afraid of on their business. And so I'd say just focus as much as you can on those, and do it in an area, a geographic area or a vertical that you think you can get to scale to very quickly.
Okay, Umang.
Mine would be just know your customer really well and assume like you don't know anything when you start. And by customer I mean both the supply and the demand side in the marketplace. Like we've just been so surprised by like how the market's evolved and different things. Just be willing to sort of keep learning and do it yourself. If you're, whether cleaning, become a cleaner, become a lawyer, you can't become a lawyer, but, understand the pain points and really get into it, because if you don't understand it, it'll be really hard to sort of provide value.
Okay, final word, Leigh.
I'd focus on the consumer problem. So while you might start with supply side in order to get the flywheel going, it's the consumer problem, because if you get the consumers, you'll get the supply side. So what's the consumer problem that you're solving, and it's got to ring true.
Okay, please join me in giving these folks an enthusiastic round of applause.